As Katherine stood in front of the mirror, carefully applying her makeup, I felt the weight of her words hanging in the air, suffocating the essence of our relationship. The reflection looking back at me was not only her reflection, but also a stark reminder of the cracks in our solid family foundation. Each stroke of her lipstick was like a dagger piercing my heart, a painful reminder of the intimacy she was willing to share with someone else. "You change your mind after all?" I asked, my voice trembling with desperation, hoping to spark an idea in her eyes, but her gaze remained firm, defying my pleas. "Desmond, we've already talked about this," she objected, her tone firm but tinged with sadness. "I'm leaving, and he wants me, and I want him. Ob, this tool is really huge. I'm ready to fumble it forever." You have to accept that her words echoed in the void of our shared history. That now seemed like a distant memory, and there was no way to get it back. How could I accept this betrayal from the woman who had been my rock, my partner, my everything? The pain of that realization cut deeper than any blade, leaving me standing on the wreckage of our shattered dreams. I was clinging to the fading remnant of a love that was slipping through my fingers like grains of sand as I searched desperately for a glimmer of understanding in Katherine's eyes. Her demeanor changed, becoming colder and more calculating. It was as if a veil had opened, revealing a side of her I'd never seen before. "You know the consequences of divorcing me, as you've stated," and her words were a warning and manipulation in one, with each syllable painting a grim picture of the consequences. A landscape strewn with the wreckage of my financial security and emotional well-being. It was a Mario that was designed to put me at a disadvantage, to strip me of any semblance of power or control that I wanted to retain. As the weight of her ultimatum came over me like a suffocating blanket, I realized that the woman standing before me was no longer the Katherine I had married. She had become a stranger. It was like a puppeteer was pulling the strings of my life, without any consideration for the love and trust we once shared. I was so shocked, I actually stumbled back, questioning everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd dedicated my heart to. Katherine's abrupt change left me perplexed and questioning. I had to ask myself, was the person in front of me really Katherine, or was she just a mask for someone else? Her motives were as mysterious as her demeanor, leaving me trying to make sense of things. My mother's endorsement only added to my confusion, making things even more complicated. Katherine was an enigma. It seemed like she believed that manipulating me was not only acceptable but essential in establishing her dominance within our marriage. This revelation stood in stark contradiction to the woman I had believed her to be, compassionate, honest, and sincere. There was a huge gap between perception and reality. As time went on, the gap between what I thought I knew and what I was learning widened. Katherine's words were like a sharp blade cutting through the air. Each one was a bitter reminder of the power dynamics she wanted to impose on our relationship. She spoke about my father's willingness to do what my mother wanted. I couldn't help but feel angry. This was her idea of our future? A distorted version of the past where I'd be silenced by her commands? My father, reduced to a shadow of his former self, haunted my thoughts like a ghost from a forgotten nightmare. It was a nightmare, but despite the weight of her words, I refused to be shackled by the chains of conformity. "It won't be easy," she conceded, her tone dripping with condescension. "But in the end, you'll realize that the easiest way is to just accept it." But to me, surrender was not synonymous with this. It was a betrayal of everything I believed in. I believed in a betrayal of the very essence of my being. I refused to be a prisoner of societal expectations. I refused to be condemned to a life of silent submission. As I stood before her, my resolve hardened. I made a silent vow echoing in the depths of my soul. I would not be another casualty in the war of gender roles. I would not be sacrificed. She finished her makeup on the altar of patriarchal tradition, and she looked undeniably stunning. Her gypsy heritage gave her a captivating allure, with her dark skin and sleek black hair. Despite her slightly petite nose, her deep brown eyes were now complemented by her nose, making her look exotic. I truly believed I had found a treasure in her as I met Katherine's gaze with unwavering determination. I felt the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air between us, like a silent plea for her to reconsider. Instead of meeting my resolve with empathy or understanding, she regarded me with a dismissive gaze, as though her objections were nothing more than the grumblings of a child. The sting of her indifference cut deeper than any blade, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable in the face of her indifference. "I understand this is difficult for you," she began, her voice softening slightly. "But I do love you." Her words offered little solace in facing the betrayal that threatened to tear apart our marriage. "I married you because I loved you, because you're a great husband and father." But her attempts to justify her actions only made me feel worse. She was just trying to make me angrier. I felt deceived by the woman I loved. As she spoke of her need for multiple partners, I felt a wave of Noah water over me. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered on my tongue. "If you stop resisting," she offered. Her words were dripping with, "I'll reward you when I get back," but I couldn't stand the thought of being bought and sold like a piece of property. It made me feel sick to my stomach. I realized that the woman I had once loved was nothing more than a stranger wearing her face. She was a stranger whose her actions have shattered the illusion of our happiness. It's beyond repair. Did she genuinely find that proposal enticing? Her demeanor shifted to seriousness as she spoke further. "You may not agree with it, but you'll come to accept it, just like everything else that can't change. I won't engage intimately with you anymore. He desires I'm not exclusive, but I'll still support you in other ways." Her words carried a finality that struck me deeply. "Why did you choose him over me?" I was frustrated as I questioned her decision. She just laughed in response. "I've told you, Desmond. No single man can fulfill all my needs. Besides, he only earns $2,000 a year. $500 a year is nothing to the warehouse. We need your income to sustain the lifestyle that I and our children deserve." I realized she hadn't mentioned loving me once. "How do I look?" I didn't ask in a loving way, which made me realize it was missing. I replied bluntly. She chuckled, seeing through my attempt at cruelty. "You're just trying to be." She was harsh, but I expected as much. She grabbed her purse, took a sip of her ID, a spare lipstick and some emergency cash before heading to the front door. As she tried to kiss me goodbye, I turned my head, letting her lips meet only my cheek. It was a gesture that left me feeling unsettled. "Desmond, I know this will be challenging for you." She gave me a pep talk, saying that this wasn't the life I'd imagined, but that I'd get used to it and even start to enjoy the lack of responsibility. She said that my background as a soldier used to following orders would help me adjust. It was easier as she hurried out the door, leaving me with some spare time. I realized that she had never asked about my military service. Perhaps she saw it as the only thing she could relate to, but military service is more than just following orders. I decided to reach out to her mother. I realized that I knew more than she thought. I told Christine what Katherine had said, and I was a bit surprised at how much she seemed to have influenced her father. I said that I agreed with her that women were naturally suited to lead, and that they should use all the means at their disposal to maintain that advantage. I was struggling to understand it all. I was so surprised. My main job is to provide financial support and raise children. I couldn't believe it. Christine nodded, reassuring me that Katherine's temporary loyalty to another man was necessary to establish the proper dynamic. Once you fully embrace your role, there will be plenty of opportunities to please. "Listen," she said, though her words didn't really ease my growing unease. "In reality, she relies on you as her husband, and societal norms dictate that you're the one she lives with. She needs your support to maintain a clear head and effectively manage the family," Christine continued, emphasizing the significance of my role. "You articulated it perfectly," I replied, appreciating her clarity. "It truly makes sense. I'm grateful I could help clarify the situation. I understand it might seem harsh and like a significant change." Christine acknowledged that, however, you'll quickly adapt and may even find fulfillment in the role you're assuming. "I'm not sure I'm correct, but please ensure the girls are in bed by 9:30. "Of course," Christine responded, respecting your wishes in that regard. "We women are not unreasonable. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have further questions. Perhaps I can provide answers that are clearer than Katherine's." As Christine involved herself further, I couldn't shake the feeling that there would be consequences. While she wouldn't face physical harm, the emotional repercussions would be significant. I was well aware of Katherine's intentions. Karen was wrong to trust me. She thought I'd just sit back and let things happen, but she was wrong. I knew what was going on. I reached out to a few people who I knew could help. Peter was one of them. He knew everything about surveillance and electronic security. While he was in reconnaissance units abroad, he tapped our phones and intercepted Katherine's conversations through her car, purse, and cell phone, gathering a trove of audio recordings of her discussions with her mother, friends, and lover regarding their schemes. I suspected that some of her associates might also be contemplating similar actions, depending on the outcome of Caring's endeavors. Freddie was skilled in intelligence. Elliot, now an executive director, had access to the company's private jet, which he could use with minimal oversight. Then there were Aiden and Anthony, known as Chris within our group. These men were adept fighters, skilled in various weapons and marksmanship, each operating at a high level of proficiency. The plan commenced at 10:40 p.m. It was 10:40. I made sure the kids were in bed by 9:20, which was part of the plan. I packed several suitcases with my own stuff and the kids' clothes and toys. I made sure to pack the kids' clothes, but we could easily get more when we got settled. As we left, we made one last trip to visit relatives. When we arrived at Christine and Matthew's house, I noticed it was dark, except for the glow from the living room, where Katherine's parents were watching TV. I found Chris, who was keeping an eye on the house. Aiden quickly filled me in on what had happened. The kids were already asleep by 9. It'll probably be about 20 minutes before they're asleep. The people inside have been watching TV since 10:15. The husband made a few trips to the kitchen for drinks and snacks, but that was about it for now. We're ready to proceed, just give the word. Let's do it, I replied, advancing toward the house. The team's presence would have gone unnoticed to any unsuspecting observer. They relied solely on manual tools. There was no need for automation. Meanwhile, I stood back and watched the living room. I saw the team enter and quickly take control of the situation. Eventually, I made my way to the front door and stepped inside. Christine was pleading with them, saying, "Please don't hurt us. You must have the wrong people. We haven't done anything. Our granddaughters are. They were sleeping in the next room. Please just let us go. We won't tell anyone," she said. She noticed me and fell silent. Her eyes were filled with fear and confusion. "What's happening?" "Desmond, Katherine, is this your doing?" I asked her, my voice trembling. "If you don't let us go, Desmond, what's going on?" Her questions were met with a tone I had never heard from her. I said firmly, "You can't stop this, and neither can Katherine. Listen to what I have to say, and save your questions until the end." While we were talking, Chris tied them up in the dining room. These men were true experts. Christine and Matthew would stay tied up until someone I let them go, or they managed to break free. "Christine, Matthew, I've made a decision. I refuse to accept the future you and your daughter are trying to dictate to me. I could live my life in servitude to her and shift all responsibility onto her, but I simply don't believe it will work for me," I declared. "I've been aware of your plan for a while now, and I've taken my own precautions since you've been involved in it. Basically, you've been supporting her financially, so you'll face some consequences too." "What might those consequences be?" Christine interrupted sarcastically. I replied firmly until the end. "I'll provide all the necessary information, but since you've asked, I'll answer that question now. In my view, the consequence that will hurt you the most is that you'll never see your granddaughters again," Desmond stated firmly, my heart heavy with the weight of my decision. "No, please, no, you can't do that." "Don't," Christine pleaded desperately, her voice filled with anguish. I raised my hands to halt her rambling. "I can and I will, but Katherine is still young. Perhaps she'll find a replacement for you." Christine suddenly became aggressive, attempting to seize control. "We'll find you, Desmond. We won't spare any expense to track you down. You know we have money. You'll regret this. You can try, but you're mistaken about one thing: you don't have any money," I replied calmly, and Christine's incredulous expression begged for an explanation. "One of the consequences of never seeing your grandchildren again is that certain measures were necessary to prevent you from taking that action," I explained regretfully so. "I took the unfortunate step of emptying the Allo bank accounts, leaving just enough to cover your expenses for a month or two. This includes your investment account, and even that secret bank account you and Katherine opened as a backup fund, which you thought I didn't know about." "How could you do this?" Christine exclaimed, shocked as you can see. "It's clear you didn't realize just how much money I could get hold of thanks to my military career." That's how I got my hands on almost all of your cash, including the cash advances on all your credit cards. I kept my cool while you thought about what I'd said. You'll have to face up to an overwhelming debt. Matthew, I hope you don't have plans to retire anytime soon. Matthew is silent, looking at me. Maybe he was hoping I'd offer him a job on the Silver Lining. The good news is that you'll be together. I should mention that Katherine won't be able to afford the house since she doesn't work, and even selling that property won't yield much. Your credit cards have been canceled and your balances are almost at zero. You won't have enough funds to attract attention in searches, so she'll have to move in with you. Maybe between the three of you you'll make it work. We'll still find a way. Just wait. I'm looking forward to it. Christine declared defiantly. In fact, I'll give you a little hint to assist you. Don't bother searching within the US, we won't be here. And don't bother looking for Desmond, Mafia, or Jackson after tonight. These identities won't exist on paper at least. I excused myself and went to wake up the girls. Daddy, they exclaimed in unison as they stared at me. We packed their belongings and I explained that we were heading out on a little trip, and they seemed excited, mentioning how their mum must be too. I told them we'd talk about it later. We went to the private airstrip where Elliot's corporate plane was waiting for us. Aiden was going to take my car to a local motel, which was a good move to throw off any pursuers. Once on board, the girls were fascinated by the space, which was a far cry from. Once we were on the plane, I told them that things had changed and we wouldn't be seeing Mum, Grandma, and Grandpa anymore. We also talked about their new names and where we'd be living. They were initially sad and tearful, but I was confident they'd adapt. After all, they were still young. Katherine R. was quiet after her date at 4. It was 20 in the morning, and I was feeling a mix of emotions. It wasn't a romantic entanglement. They had simply met at a bar, had a few drinks, and then headed back to his place. Tonight was enjoyable, she reflected. Not just because of the guy I initially met, but also because we picked up a couple of his friends at the bar, so it turned into a group hangout. Desmond needed to. I needed more than he could provide. It wasn't a criticism of him. No man could fulfill all my needs. I hadn't felt truly content for a long time until tonight. She opened the garage door and waited for it to lift. It wasn't surprising that Desmond's spot was empty. Dad had reacted the same way as Mum had told me. She thought it was important to acknowledge. The challenge ahead, I was hoping everything would go well, but as Mum said, Margot wouldn't accept our situation easily. Desmond's absence affected her more than she thought, showing how much she loved him despite his current feelings. I knew he would come home soon. He loved the kids and would come back. I thought it was about time he got back here. Maybe he'd even ask her to let him serve her, just to see the girls. But Desmond was still nowhere to be seen. It wasn't unexpected, but the longer he stayed away, the more determined she became to receive an apology from him. After a long shower, I went to bed and quickly fell asleep at around 11. I called my parents at 10 a.m. to check on the girls, but there was no answer. I tried their cell phones next, but there was still no reply. It seemed odd that they were not answering, so I tried calling again after 40 minutes. When I arrived at their house, their car was parked outside, and everything appeared normal. I called out for them, but they did not respond. I went into the living room to look for them. I was horrified to find them both bound to chairs and unconscious. What happened? I hurriedly began untying them, as Mom explained through labored breaths. Desmond took the kids' caffeine. He took them. I struggled to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Desmond did this to you and then took the girls. She explained that I was struggling to comprehend the gravity of the situation. It was Desmond and some of his friends. They seemed like soldiers. They barged in, took the girls, and left. He said he was leaving the country and would never see them again. The weight of her words left me reeling. Could I have underestimated him so greatly? I was really surprised by what he did. I didn't think he was capable of it. After I'd freed my mum, I told her to sit down and quickly called Desmond on his mobile. I was determined to resolve the situation. I hoped he'd come back with my children, or he'd regret it. Desmond's story is as follows. I was expecting a call from Katherine, and then the phone rang. I let it ring 4 times before finally answering, my heart pounding with anxiety. Hello, where are you? I disconnected the call moments later. The phone rang again, then hung up. She pleaded, but I disregarded her plea and hung up once more. The fire ran again, prompting me, I'm going to give you one last chance to speak civilly, Katherine. If I disconnect again, it'll be the last time you hear from me. I could sense her irritation through the phone as she begrudgingly responded, Yes, I understand. What's going on? Why were my parents tied up? I decided to answer her questions in reverse order. First, Katherine, you no longer have children. They're with me now, and you won't see them again. After we hung up, I told her this number won't be reachable anymore. If you want answers, you need to mind your turn and listen clearly. Her demeanor shifted instantly. She seemed to think she could still sway me, but she needed to understand the gravity of the situation. She was unaware of it yet. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I can imagine how you felt when you found out that your parents and children had disappeared. I felt the same way when I realized I'd have to support my wife while she was with other men, and I wouldn't have had to if you've remained faithful, I said firmly. She tried to justify her actions, saying she was just trying to provoke me into fighting for her. We've been married for 8 years, so I didn't have to fight for you anymore. I just want to feel desired. That's all she kept saying. I know it's not true. I responded to your mother, who explained everything to me. I was told about the role of the provider in children's upbringing. I was told that this could be my reward if I perform my duties well. I was also told that all the other men would serve to fulfill your desires. Now you're free to try to shift the blame onto someone else. I felt the weight of betrayal. You were wrong to think I'd accept the accusations, and I continued, my voice hardening, Desmond, please forgive me. Just give me back my children. I'll do anything. Katherine pleaded desperately. Alas, Katherine, you've shown your true colors and that's it. As I already informed your mother. I replied, you can try to find us, but we live under different names in another country. We have new birth certificates that don't even indicate you're their mother, so there's no paper trail for you to pursue. I'm actually glad my parents died in that car crash. It would have. It was a complicated situation. I ended the call, feeling a bit down, and threw the phone into the water. It sank slowly, and I watched it disappear. I felt a sense of liberation. I realized that I was free from the chains of deception and betrayal that had bound me to Katherine for so long. I turned my back on the life we had once shared, and embraced the promise of a new beginning. I was finally free from the deception and betrayal that had bound me to Katherine for so long. By turning my back on the life we once shared, I embraced the promise of a new beginning, free from the ghosts of my past. Please post your opinions on this story. Have a great day.